Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Gordon, and I'm an astrologer. Of course, here living in New York City, and I've had a focus on medical astrology, health and astrology throughout my career, although I've studied various different forms over the last, I'd say, 15 to 20 years, 15 full-time practicing. So I'm a Virgo, hence my focus has always been medical since the very beginning. Since I was 14 years old, I began learning astrology. And I think, honestly, I learned in medical terms, and that really stayed with me. And I related to it most, actually, throughout everything. So the first chart work I did was seeing the chart as a map of the body, as well as spirit, soul, emotional patterns, psyche, all of that as well. But I just felt it was so important to remember that we're looking at the chart as form too. And I mean, medical astrology is also one of the first astrology practice, just because we had necessity. You know, people were sick and we hadn't invented a scalpel or x-ray or things like that yet. But we did have this amazing wisdom of the heavens that could peer into the human body as well. And so I really, today, my goal was sort of to demystify medical astrology and to make it tangible for all of you who might be evolutionary astrologers or psychological or a whole various kinds of astrology. There's ways that you can integrate medical astrology into your practice. And so I think I would just like to share with you easy ways that you can sort of integrate it into any practice and how you can start to see the chart in a more layered way. So that's why today is going to be called Medical Astrology Made Easy. Any questions before we begin? And if not, I'm just going to dive in. If you all do have questions throughout today, please write in the chat box, or honestly, you can just, unmute yourself and speak up. That might be even easier for me. So I would just say oh yeah, one more thing. I actually have a book. It's on my bookshelf. It's on my bookshelf over there. I didn't bring it over here to show you, but I published it a few years ago. I co-authored it with a medical doctor, and the book is called Your Body and the Stars. I'll put a link to it later in the chat. But the book really is me, an astrologer and a doctor here, riffing on the body from head to toe, speaking about the physical, the metaphysical, emotional, psychological connotations of every body part from the astrologer and the doctor. And we have exercises in there as well. It's on Amazon and all of that, and all your local bookstores do. It's called Your Body and the Stars. So I think after I published that book in 2016, I started getting called by the Dr. Oz show. So I've been going on the Dr. Oz show quarterly, speaking about medical astrology as well, in a way that the general public can understand, not to astrologers. So that's been really interesting because I've definitely been getting messages from people all over the world and all over the country who've seen the show and who would have never otherwise been into astrology. And their first entry point was through the Dr. Oz show and medical. So that's been rather interesting. There's this whole new sort of demographic that's asking about astrology now. Anyway, so I've really tried to make things tangible also for the masses as well. Okay, I think let's just go ahead and dive in. Let me get a sense here. Write in the chat box who here has a background in medical astrology already and who does not. Just write yes if you do, write no if you don't. I want to get a sense of who I'm talking to in the room, okay? So just write there in the chat box, yes or no, so I know who's in the room today. Let's see what we got here. Okay, great. So, excellent. I'm just reading yes, no. It might be about half today. Okay, good. So this might be quite different. I've been than what you know about medical astrology and the way you've been taught it. If you do have a background, I'll just say that. because I'm going to speak about it, I guess, in somewhat of a more multidimensional way at times. So we'll look into that more. But great. Those of you that don't know anything about it, you should be totally fine with this. And the ones that do, I'm eager to hear your questions as well. Okay, let's just dive in. So basically, the body is the natal chart as much as the personality, soul, and spirit. We all have to remember when we look at a chart, we're also really looking at the functioning of the organs, of the blood flow, the heart, and the musculoskeletal system. All of that is the chart as the spirit, the emotions, the psyche come into form in our physical 3D bodies. So we have to remember we're always looking at form as well. So we're looking into the chart. As you know, the microcosm of our cell can be repeated, and you will see that echoed in patterns. They're echoed in many ways throughout the body, and patterns in the body and in our DNA echoed throughout our whole universe as well. So we do have to remember we are parts of the whole, as the cells of our body are parts of the whole as well. This is all part of us. Basis here is planets, they just want to do their job, okay? And the thing here is like, what happens on the physical level when a planet cannot do its job? Who knows what happens when a planet is really having a hard time doing its job? You know, it gets blocked, it gets sublimated, a planet's not able to, to its job, which let's say Mars and Aries, it just has to express itself in that like clean punch kind of way, right? What happens when it can't do its job? Yep, it gets stuck, it gets stagnant, and a whole variety of things can happen. There can be, one can get sick, there can be illness, there can be toxicity, there can be dryness, coldness, too much moisture, a whole lot of things can gather up depending on the nature of that planet, right? So we just ultimately want to make sure that all the planets can do their job, okay? When we're checking in on the health of a chart. That's the baseline here, okay? So your anatomy of astrology, what the zodiac tells us about our health, we just talked about this, how the birth chart tells a story of the soul. The planetary positions at birth also appear into the physical form. It's karma, and this might relate to your karma from past lives. Also, this connects to your strengths, susceptibilities, also good areas of the body where there's grace, where there's ease, as well as where there's pains too. So the idea is to basically be able to turn the birth chart into a guide for well-being as well. And basically you are the map of the health of that moment in cosmos, what exactly is going on there. And you are all well aware how you are basically this unique map of energy, a unique moment in time. You are the universe at that moment, always broadcasting the energy of that moment. However, under certain times, under certain transits, let's say you have a very cold and wet chart, like a lot of planets that are in air and water, okay? And then all of the transits, all of the outer planets are also in air and water. Of course, you could be more susceptible to getting sick around that time. So we're going to look a little bit into those sorts of things as well, how the outer ecosystem works with your inner ecosystem. I'm going to use the word ecosystem a lot today because we're going to talk about this in terms of the natural world. And you also probably are aware that medical diagnosis through the chart has an incredibly long history from the Hellenistic times, made more popular in the medieval times and the Renaissance. And, in the last few hundred years, it really fell out of popularity with what we can call, the Age of Endarkenment and all of those sorts of, advents in science, which were also great, but really took us away from seeing the body as connected to the patterns of the sky, the earth, and just seeing human in a more systemic nature. when astrology had its comeback, in the 1960s, it was pop astrology primarily then, and medical really didn't get dragged along with that. It sort of just kind of was lost back into the 1600s. It's sort of, it's been that part of astrology that is finding more relevance, I think, now that there's sort of this health revolution happening anyway, with Ayurveda and a whole lot of other things. So also these are the four humors, but we're going to talk in English in terms that your clients will be able to understand. We're not going to tell your clients about phlegmatic or sanguine or choleric problems, but we can talk about earth, air, fire, and water, which is what they are, and the connotations of those elements in the body, and what the balance is of all of these. So we're going to keep it simple. We're going to start with fully going through the elements and the modes and understanding the ecosystems they create. So you're actually going to imagine your chart as a sort of landscape first. And I would like you to all to try to do this with your clients' charts too, to begin with. And you'll ask a series of questions once you develop a landscape pattern. So the basic fire, earth, air, water, and cardinal fixed immutable is enough to develop a landscape pattern. So you want to ask, what does your ecosystem look like? If we were to take your inner planets, we're going to leave out the outer planets, and create an ecosystem. Okay. So we're going to start at the basic level. The element of fire. If you have a lot of fire in your ecosystem, we're just talking sun, moon, ascendant, Mercury, Mars, and Venus right now. Okay. What happens, you could have used Jupiter and Saturn, but let's keep it simple for now. What happens if there's a lot of fire in an ecosystem? It heats up. We get overheated. We get hot. We overexert ourselves. We go too far. Heat also relates to the heart. So, there's an overuse of fire. We also can become more dry in the body. Usually people with a lot of fire in their chart naturally are going to crave more water. What happens if the climate becomes too dry and hot? So we want to first consider just the temperature going on in the chart. And also, sure, these people, their secret sauce is also their creativity and their fire and their passion. So you never want to make anybody lose that. But if somebody is having a fire problem, you want to be able to find ways to regulate that. Now, Earth is heavy, as fire can go too far, too fast, and overheat. Earth is sedentary, it's heavy, responsibility-driven, practical, and as fire can bring the over-exhilaration, Earth can bring a heaviness or depression or responsibility, but a sense of being, it's a solid force here, right? So too much Earth, too much weight, too grounded, actually, feeling. And we can imagine what would happen if they're together as well. Air connotates the mental body, clarity, perception, objective awareness, and the winds that move through the body. What happens when there's a lot of wind, a windstorm? The earth becomes very dry, okay? What happens if the body becomes dry? The bones become more brittle. They're not getting all of the oils that they need and the moisture. So we need to ultimately understand, and there's a lightness here, but it can tend towards brittle and dry. Not necessarily good for the skin, hair, nails, that sort of thing too, a predominance of air. So Then we go to the element of water. Water was the emotional body, the feelings. And again, water is heavy, like the earth. As well as it brings connection, brings things together, it merges them, reflection, depth. What also happens if there's too much water, if there's an abundance of water going on in the body, and let's say the water is heated, let's say there's warm water, well, bacteria could grow, anything can grow. So there can be higher risk of infection and things becoming toxic because it's not getting filtered through enough. There's not enough, it's just too dense in the water. So each of these elements work together to create an ecosystem. And your main goal is to keep yours in balance, right? And we can see through various transits in the sky, different ecosystems can be set out of balance. Like even I remember there was a time there was a stellium in Capricorn, and so many people were having bone injuries during that time. So again, we're looking at the inner planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and your rising sign. For this practice, I like to give the Sun and the rising sign a 2 count, but ultimately you want to tally up how much of each element is happening here in your chart. The fire, the blood flow, the energy, of course, that can be overheating, overexertion. The air, the circulation of the body, the mental agility. That can also, too much air could be dryness, right? Earth, your muscle, your solid force, your grounding, can also be a heaviness and a lethargy. Water, the body fluids, the emotional body, can also bring growths and toxicity if anything goes out of balance with these. So you want to think first about the what's the elemental balance of these, just with the inner planets. What's that going to look like? And so then we're going to start to imagine what an ecosystem would look like. And I'm just going to show you here a couple examples. So like, can you all see my screen right now? There's 6 different little pictures, right? Great.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. So here, and this is exactly how I'd like you to think of ecosystems. You want to ask 3 questions when we create these. I'm going to say, what does this ecosystem offer to the world? What is it good at? What does it do? The next question is, what is its biggest challenge? What is it lacking? Where could the problems show up? And then ultimately, how can we make this work? So here's some vastly different kinds of ecosystems. If we look at, this one in the lower left, which is a canal in Venice, you see this predominance of water and earth, right? There's probably not much wind because of the buildings, not much cross-pollination. And we can imagine that without the wind moving through, that the water could become toxic, overheated, things like that. However, you can see that the buildings are very close together, the water's in between them. There's probably a rather nice sense of community and continuity happening there with all of the water and earth. So you can imagine that sense of building community and connectivity is present, although perhaps lacking in perspective and everything that air would impart in agility. You see the one to the left of that, which is very cold and wet ecosystem. Obviously, when the body becomes cold and wet, we become very susceptible to getting colds, as in like March in the United States. certain times of year. So this ecosystem could use some heat. But ultimately we get a crisp clarity as well. So you want to really consider, here's one on the lower left that might feel kind of Capricorn, Scorpio. It's rather dark. There's not much light there. There's buildings, there's darkness, there's solid form. So you really first want to consider yours as format, and then what does it offer? Okay. And I've done this before with people on retreat where they create an actual drawing of this, and then you look at your relationship and you see how you kind of get along with somebody as well. So let me go back to where we were. I'm going to see, what does yours look like? Oh yeah. So does anybody want to share what their ecosystem might look like? Has anybody, did any of you kind of think about this now? What sort of ecosystem? Do you have a volcano? Is it a glacier? Is it, does it look like a field? Does it look like these neat and evenly Virgoan crops, with some Libra winds moving through it? What does yours look like? Somebody says they have a grand trine in water, rising Cancer, Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Pisces. Definitely wet. Yeah. So we want to talk about now a little more of the nuance, the difference between the waters of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces and how they move through the body. So I tend to start, like you're squinting. You look at a painting from really far away, and then you can get more and more and more granular over time. But when we begin with medical astrology, you first want to start with the ecosystem. Okay, what is it? Hot, dry, wet, cold. And what does it look like it creates here? Great. So we'll actually go a little deeper into the signs then. Does anybody else want to share theirs? What sort of landscape? If you have all fire and air, maybe this is a desert, like a big open sky desert landscape. There's a crispness in that air, or it might need some water to balance it over time. But yes.
How would you, I have a Gemini ascendant, but I also have, with a bunch of planets in Gemini in the 12th, and my Sun and Mercury are in the 3rd in Leo. So that's like a lot of air. I mean, would you consider the house, or are you only looking at the planets?
We're going to get to the houses, but I'm not adding air just because they're in the 3rd house.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No.
Curious.
So yeah, I mean, Gemini, what does it do? It brings, it's a wind that cross-pollinates. And Leo is that bright sun. So this sort of works nicely together.
Yeah. And I have a Capricorn moon and a Virgo, Venus in Virgo. So I have the earth, and the air and the fire.
Okay. So here, this is a climate that doesn't get much water. So it's like the dry season in a tropical place, Right. So you can sort of imagine what that might be, maybe various regions of Mexico might be like that.
Yeah,
fire.
let's move.
So getting to know and those are usually parts of the world where you'll naturally feel at home in when it matches your ecosystem. And it's also good to be aware of what it's missing, so you can, of course, bring that into your life more too in various ways. Somebody wrote in and they said they have a Capricorn stellium, Gemini moon, Aquarius sun. Dryness is the predisposition for sure. Right. We'll talk about now, I think it's a good time to go into a little more of the nuance of each sign and what kind of earth, air, fire, and water. As the fire heat wants to operate very different than the earth heat. And remember, the planets just want to do their job. So we're going to ultimately these signs are going to become the verbs. I'll show you how in a minute, that enable these planets to do their job. So the fire heat is like the lighting the match, the spark, right? It's the initial heat. Taurus, we have a moist, rich earth. And the Gemini is these sharp, very drying winds. If you imagine this in the body. We can see Cancer as the still, calm waters. What happens near the still, calm waters? Most animals procreate, right? That's where they have babies and nurture and things like that. When we have Leo, there's this bright, warming sun. Virgo, there's a cultivated soil, crops, fields, terrace, flatlands, these sorts of things that are somewhat manicured as well, perhaps. We have the Libran breezes, moving things around as well, also drying, as any air is going to dry. And Scorpio, we reach the deep waters that well, beneath the earth, the hot springs, the volcanic waters, the ocean depth, that sort of explosive water that can come through the earth as well. So we're really bringing the chart into the natural world first here. And then the fire of Sagittarius, it feels like the ceremonial fire, the torch of purpose, the spiritual flame, and this sort of heat that comes from a purpose that we're burning. Capricorn is rock. It's mountaintops. It's the large rock. It's the heights. Aquarius, we have sudden winds that awaken, cool winds, sharp winds. And Pisces is, of course, the moving water, the rivers, the streams, the oceans, waterfalls moving through. So that's a little, now that there's a bit more words on it, you can start to see, like, for example, if you have mostly Scorpio, Sagittarius, that can be in sort of eruptive volcano, which there's all these deeper wisdom traditions that come from the depths in Scorpio, come out in the fires of Sagittarius to share with the world. Fire and water is, of course, a pretty explosive energy in itself, but there's depth in that wisdom. There's teaching in the Sagittarius. I'm going to check what you all are writing here.
Rebecca.
Yes.
I have 3 planets in Capricorn and I live very high up, 4,000 feet above sea level. So that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Capricorns love especially the mountaintops and skiing and being that. Yeah. And it's ultimately good for them. It's sort of a hair of the dogs kind of thing. That's great. I see somebody else wrote that this is mostly fire and earth, so volcanic ecosystem. Inflammation, dryness is constant. Yeah, fire and earth can be dryness, not necessarily volcanic though, unless there's some Scorpio, Sagittarius stuff going on down there. There's things coming from the earth. But dryness, yeah, inflammation, inflammation we can talk about more in terms of Neptune and other sorts of things. Mandy says, I have a grand water trine mentioned earlier, sun, moon, rising. Okay. Yeah, so actually, you know what? It's going to be better if when, for specific chart information, you can instead unmute yourself if there's something that's relevant. So, because there's a lot of chart data to read for me to read in the chat box.
I'm so sorry about that. I was just actually maybe trying to zero in on the planets, not necessarily specific to my chart. It was just an example, but like maybe how the planets work in the signs. I don't know if you're going to go over that.
Yeah, that's what we're doing next. But first,
Sweet.
Understanding the signs. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So those are details though. Before you do that, and this is where I think we kind of skip steps sometimes in medical, and then we go right into the chart. Okay, Mars squares Neptune. There's contamination in the blood, all of that stuff. But we really didn't get a sense of the ecosystem first. And we have to understand the lay of the land before we get all nitty gritty, you know? So, okay. So we're going to first understand these signs in medical, because the signs first are going to show us parts of the body as well. And we're going to see how those signs are ultimately doing, how the planets are animating them in ways as well. Okay, I see a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so yeah, please try to keep the examples simple because it's a lot to read for me in the chat box. Okay, thanks. And I want to focus on the information. Great. So the signs and their functions. Let's get started with this. Aries. You're born in Aries. You have an Aries rising, anything in Aries. If that Aries planet is in balance, it's assertive, it's aware, it's doing its job. If it's out of balance, it overdoes Aries, right? It goes headstrong. Or let's say it can't express itself in Aries. Then we get the blocked sinuses, we get the headaches, we get somebody that's just always getting scars on their face, hurting their heads in all sorts of ways. You know, we have an unbalanced Aries energy. You all have Aries energy in you, no matter what your sign is, right? When you get a lot of things like blocked sinuses and headaches and sorts of Aries problems, you have to question yourself. First of all, how is your ability to state your needs in life and push forward and ask for what you want, okay? So we're really just checking in on the functionality of each sign within you and that body part. It's a bit like a body scan. Okay, Taurus, the neck. At best, the sensual, fully embodied self. You know, when it's the Taurus energy is out of balance, we become stiff neck and too vested in the material world and holding on to things. As the throat, it's kind of swallowing, it's taking in. So we become too stuck, right? If our Taurus planets are out of balance. Or let's even say there's no Taurus or Aries energy in your chart. Maybe these are areas that you want to wake up within you. And in my book, there's a whole lot of ways to sort of enliven, awaken any kind of like muscles in atrophy, any signs that have not been awakened so much within you, through many different practices of affirmation, movement, and all kinds of things. Gemini, the arms and the hands, your communication ability. Again, when the Gemini is high functioning in you, you're easy to move your arms and hands to the world and connect to people, communicate well. And you see all kinds of things show up, like people, like somebody tends to keep breaking their shoulder or smashing their finger in a door and things like this. Accidents also show up as messengers that say the Gemini energy within you is out of balance. We can look at the sign of Cancer, the chest, the breast, first of all. We're seeing the ability to nurture. And when the Cancerian energy is out of balance within you, we get stuck. We get stuck in the water and the self-pitying space. And you know, these are the areas of the energy is, when emotions get blocked, it's the emotional body, it's cysts. Cysts can be, they don't have to necessarily be Cancer cysts, but anybody can get a cyst. So just to be aware, that's sort of like stuck energy. Leo, the back and the heart, the mid-back and the heart, as we know, the sort of like vivacious and confident sign. When it's sublimated, a cowardly, or overexpressed, this grandiose energy. So any Leo energy out of balance within us, we tend to have back issues, heart issues, if we're not really feeling like we can radiate our being to the world in ways. And without that sort of balance as well. Virgo, the core and the abdomen, where we digest reality, we digest life, okay? Your ability to assimilate what you need and what you don't need. How's the Virgo functioning within you? It's a purposeful and conscientious sign. But if it's low functioning or over functioning, we get a compulsive and permissive nature, one or the other. So it's checking in on the core. Literally, how strong is your core? How is your digestion? How are you able to digest food and metabolize reality as it's showing itself to you as well? Libra, the lower back. Here, we're checking in on, quite literally, when we bend over backwards so much, we get low back pain. And it, of course, rules the lower back and the kidneys. When it's in balance, it is fair, aesthetic, and at worst, we bend over backwards, and it's people-pleasing energy. Many people have had low back pain in their life, and I think we all have sort of at some point bent over backwards too much. Can also be unyielding. Scorpio. And Scorpio is very similar to Taurus, because Taurus is where food and air and everything enters the body, right? And Scorpio is where it all leaves the body, okay? Through these two separate canals. Scorpio rules the genitals, the sacral, the womb, and our ability to eliminate and let go of things ultimately. When the Scorpio's in balance, there's a sense of inner power and strength and an ability to create and destroy and let go of things and start over. And when it's out of balance, it becomes stuck. Emotions get stuck. Things get stuck inside of us in the sacral center, in the womb. There is stuck energy. And there's a whole series of things that can come from that. Sagittarius, our ability to have freedom, get on in the world, make our own choices, explore as we wish. The hips and thighs, of course, rule mobility. Problems like sciatica, problems in the hips and thigh area are often showing stories around freedom, whether the sublimation of freedom or the overexpression of freedom above all. And of course, the lower form of the centaurs, the reckless, debaucherous centaurs we have as well as the overly self-righteous ones too, right? Capricorn, here we're at the mountaintop. You can see the entire city planning, the knees and bones, ability to see systems, how it all works together. We take on too much. We put too much pressure on the knees. We put too much pressure on the bones. They become brittle. They break. They collapse. They dry out. So this is sort of just checking in on your body in all of these functions, how you do with any of these sort of active functions in the daily life. As we go through this, you want to think whether they are in your chart or whether they're not, and then how they're functioning within you. Your ankles, your ability to stand up for yourself, to stand on your own feet. Aquarius. And of course, when we don't know which way we want to go in life, when we haven't yet decided on what we believe in, we can feel out of balance. We can feel, and then we're more prone when we're unsure of things for sprained ankles, ankle injuries, not knowing your direction. You do get an injury, then you really have to be quite intent, have a lot of intent and deliberateness on which way you want to go. And then the feet, Pisces, which have sort of the entire body, can be found in the feet and reflexology. And as we know, Pisces connects to the empathy, the imagination, and our trust our faith, a sense, what can happen in the feet, like bunions and warts and all kinds of foot growths, foot issues can show up, bone growths, can really point to sometimes a sense of lost connection, lost faith, escapism, losing that trust. No, I know that was kind of a quick run through. I want to put these into some examples too, but how's everybody doing with that? It's just kind of a body scan down, understanding how the signs move through the form. Are you all good? Okay, great. All right, let me just see if there's any other questions. Okay, cool. We'll go to the next step then. All right. Yeah, and I wrote a series of affirmations for each of these that I can actually send to everybody here as well. Okay. Now we want to look at the modes as well. What are the functions of the modes? What do they do? Cardinal energy. A lot of cardinal in a chart. There's a lot of pressure. There can be a lot of overuse of an organ. We're pushing it so hard. We might not rest when we're tired, when we have a lot of cardinal. You just keep going and going and going, you know? And so problems show up because we push ourselves too hard. And we don't listen to the body enough and what it needs. These are cardinal problems. When there's a predominance of fixed energy, we can be more prone towards crystallization, cysts, blockages, things like that. And you want to be able to obviously remediate any of these. So like if you know you have a lot of fixed energy, perhaps you jump on a trampoline and you get the lymphatic system moving, or you know, you get more oxygen in the body, maybe you have more omegas, things like that. So cardinal people, sometimes they just need to slow the roll when there's a predominance of cardinal energy, put a lot of pressure on themselves often. Now I'm talking about things like saying 90% of the inner planets in cardinal, you know, mutable. It's movement in the body. And it's the body's reactivity to things, often the histamine responses, the autoimmune, right? This is all mutable. Allergies are a very mutable thing. Is anybody in the room heavily mutable who has allergies like Virgo, Gemini, this kind of thing? Mutable signs tend to, be a little bit more allergy prone. Yeah, Mars and Virgo, definitely. Yeah. So it's just like the body's reflex to respond to stimulus is the mutable energy, right? Yeah. Good. So Wanda changed her eating habits and then didn't have allergies. Yeah, there's so many things you can do. Cutting out dairy. I personally did hypnotherapy and that worked for allergies. So great. Okay. So now let's think about the planets as well. I know we have a little bit of time left, but I want to give you a sense of how to put this all into practice. Okay. Now we're going to we're going to understand, and the sun is here. The sun wants to do its job. We really have to make sure the sign of the sun is high functioning. Oh wait, somebody says, yeah, husband is a Virgo, major allergy sufferer. Yeah, especially Virgos have allergies. Yeah. Okay. So we want to, whatever the sign of your sun is, you want to check in on that and ultimately do a series of exercises that can really strengthen it. Because whatever sign you are, whatever signs are prominent within you are stronger in your body, but they're also more susceptible at the same time. Anything that's more pronounced in your chart is always going to be strong as well as it's susceptible. So checking in on the sun, the spirit, the heart, the core archetype you came here to live out. Now, you're going to notice if you ever look at family charts, which I love to do, go back many generations, you're going to see patterns, of course. You see patterns of Sagittarius woven through, or patterns of freedom, you know, patterns of Virgo. You're going to see cardinal patterns or fixed patterns that sometimes families carry on in their genes in a way. The ascendant I like to see as the vessel of how the sun is going to do its job. So these need to be kind of ultimately daily cleanup on the sun and ascendant signs. Make sure they are able to do their job and the core intent of each sign. The moon also relates to the stomach and the way that you received your food and your nurturing when you were a baby. You know, what was that like? What did the nurturing feel like, and how did the food sit with your body? It's your experience with that. And this is very relevant to medical as well, especially when we're talking about digestion issues. You know, if we see a moon in Aries, for example, opposed Uranus, you know, and that person has trouble digesting, we can imagine their body might have been in a fight or flight response early on, with not knowing what was going to happen, where mother was, when nurturing, when breast milk was going to come back, and things like that. So a lot of digestion issues can go back to the moon sign as well. Mercury is overall the brain, the cognitive function, where there's just a lot of busy activity in the body wherever the Mercury is. So always look, Mercury is, if Mercury's in Aries, there's just a lot going on in the head area. This is an active area. Again, what's stronger is more susceptible. Kidneys, Venus rules the kidneys and the sex organs. And ultimately, the sign that Venus is in is somewhere where there can be ease and even laziness there in the body, in that sign. It might be even a little slower functioning than some of the others. Now, Mars is the opposite. The sign Mars is in is like there's a motor going on there. And sometimes it's over-functioning. Sometimes it's doing its job too much. Like somebody in the chat box mentioned Mars and Virgo in allergies. So the histamine responses are overreacting. You know, they're doing too much, and that's what's creating the allergies. Okay, let's see. There's a question. Yeah. So whatever sign Mars is in, like if Mars is in even Cancer, sometimes there can be over acidity in the stomach and things like that even as well. Mars also rules the adrenals, the gallbladder as well. Of course, it's how you fight, it's how your drive, your sexuality. It can show where there is conflict and tension in the body, though, or too much acidity. So we especially want to pay attention to the Mars sign in medical. Now, Jupiter and Saturn are really interesting to me. Jupiter, we're talking about inflammation here. What the sign of Jupiter is in is where there can be just an over higher production of some sort of enzyme, higher production of liver enzymes especially, but overall inflammation in that area. Jupiter in Capricorn, simple inflammation around the knees, you know. Jupiter in Leo, this person could be prone to sort of inflammation around the back or the heart. So you always want to look at, as well as it can be high functioning where Jupiter is, it can overdo it there too. Can become inflamed, can overreact. Now Saturn, again, is the opposite of Jupiter. Saturn's very important in medical because it shows where there's constriction, where there's tightness, and often more of a karmic wound, something that feels like it's sort of passed down. We can feel that natural insecurity there. You know, the feeling of constriction in the body there. Something where there is a deeper lesson, something that feels a bit more karmic, where Saturn is in the body, the sign that it's in. It's like Saturn in Taurus, the throat, you know, being able to speak your truth, being able to get the words out, getting all sorts of things around the throat, thyroid issues and things like that be related. Saturn also brings a dryness and sometimes a crystallization to the sign that it's in as well. And this all sounds kind of depressing, but we'll go into some of the more exciting outer planets. And I know we got to wrap up in a couple of minutes too. Uranus. Who has been under a Uranus transit and you just can't sleep at all? That's definitely a common symptom of a Uranus transit. Uranus has a correlation to the nervous system and as well the circulation of the body. Also, so we're going to start looking at how ultimately the outer planets talk to the inners. Neptune is going to relate to the immune system of the body, the way the immune system functions. Oh, Della's under a Uranus transit. Yeah. There's great flower essences and things for that as well. So I take magnesium too under Uranus transits. So anyway, Uranus, nervous system, circulation, Neptune, the immune system. Pluto is the endocrine system. And this is sort of my take on it. And I'm not sure if you're going to find this in other astrology books. But what makes the most sense to me from my research and client work is the endocrine system pretty much controls everything in the body. Thymus, thyroid. And this was going to relate more to your generational story here. So, and here you just see a list of all of that together. Mars, acidity, bites, injury. Jupiter heals. It also exaggerates the current state. Saturn constricts. It dries up. It crystallizes. Uranus fires up the nervous system. Can bring anxiety too. Neptune can bring lethargy, depletion, depression. Pluto cleanses the role of the planet in context by killing off the old systematic function. Ultimately, a new one will show up. And the ascendant is sort of like the skin and the physical body at large. So you can all play with this in your charts. Mars and Saturn, if you're going to look at one thing to really work on in your chart, I would look at where you have Mars and where you have Saturn, because that's where we sometimes need to fortify and tonify the most. Those tend to be more like problem areas as well. Any questions here? How are you all doing? I feel like this could have easily been an hour and a half workshop. I realize perhaps it was a bit ambitious for me to put so much in one deck. Yeah, I can definitely send this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, but somebody wrote both natal and transit. Is one more important? Well, you have to, so really keep it simple. Start with the ecosystem and ask yourself those three questions. What is this ecosystem here to do for the world? What am I here to do? Is it all in Gemini, Aquarius? Are we information people? Are we sharing our information with the world? Then what does this ecosystem need? Let's say there's this area ecosystem might want some earth or something like that. And they work with people that are more implementers, on their team. So you want to know what you're good at, what you're lacking, and create that in your life, in your lifestyle, in your diet. Just trying to see it all in a more holistic way. The community, the people you surround yourself with, the experiences you have, and what's out your window, all of these sorts of things are relevant. And I just feel like we need to kind of look at ourselves as not as different from our environment, like see the actual earth elements within us. And, I would say what I like to do in this is ultimately to look at a chart ecosystem with just the personal planets. So you're going to see solar fire here. And this is how I would do it. We just put up the, to make it easy if you want to, if you don't want to do the math or anything, right? You can just put up the personal planets only, right? And that's all I did right there. And I saw that this is a fire and earth heavy ecosystem on this chart between Aries, Taurus, Capricorn, and Sagittarius. Seeing it's lacking in air and water. What does that bring? And what does it need? And ultimately, we can avoid illness, avoid getting sick by sort of balancing our ecosystems, finding ways to do that on a daily basis. For example, this person with the heavy fire and earth, I imagine they're kind of sturdy, implementer, manifester type of person, heavy earth and fire. Perhaps they need more breathing. Like, let's be simple. Perhaps they need to learn how to breathe. Perhaps they need to learn to open the windows, put a ceiling fan on. Listen to what people are doing on the other side of the world. Get some cross-pollination. Get out of your routines, get some air going on in there, right? Bringing more water into your life. Like, there's very easy, tangible ways you can balance your ecosystem. And I think that's the first step that's often overlooked in medical astrology, is if we can really just keep in balance what we have, we can all be a lot healthier. And doing that with the elements and the modes first to start off with before anything. Now, next level, I can teach another class on how the inner planets and outer planets work together. As I was saying, how Neptune and Mars would work together, and how Mercury and Uranus and things like that, and how also they work with health. I don't think there's enough time for all of that in this workshop, but I do teach a class on that, and I'm happy to explore that later if you all are interested. You can check out my website and stuff like that if you are. But these are, I hope you all have been able to get something out of this for yourself and for your clients as well. So, any questions here? Okay.
It's a fabulous, fabulous information. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for listening, everyone. It's been such a great group today. I really appreciate you having me here as well. It's my first time presenting in this group. So thank you for inviting me in, and would love to hear more from all of you in the future.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was just amazing. Just incredible information. We're looking forward to more if you would like to do some more with us. And would you all please thank Rebecca Gordon, everybody?
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes,
this is
very
great.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. It was great.
Excellent.